What's up guys, it's Manga Time once again. I'm here to bring you my review of Bleach 679, The End. And I did do a bit of a double take when I read that title. I was like, wait, what, really? That was fast. But then I was like, well, wait a minute, wait. This is, and I'll be honest, this isn't really the chapter I thought we were going to get. After the ending of last week's chapter, I thought Ichigo was basically going to get the shit beat out of him this week, and then Ishii was going to arrive at the end. But then when I saw the chapter title, I was like, wait a second. This is another one of those, this is going to be another one of those chapters where the villains basically win. And thankfully we've had a lot of those chapters this arc, because the bad guys have, you know, stomped all over the Shinigami and vice versa, but, you know, in the Arrancar arc, the bad guys never really got up to anything more than a mild roar. So, yeah, I went into this kind of pretty excited, actually, because I do like it when the villains basically win, because, you know, that's when the tension is the highest, and, yeah, this pretty much is that kind of chapter, although I feel like the setup for next week is quite obvious, but we'll get into that. Starts off with Yhwach basically walking towards them, looking, actually, I'm not gonna lie, kind of cool. I do quite like the way the power, which it looks to be essentially Mimihagi, like bursts off of the side of him. That actually is quite a cool looking effect. But he says, you know, the Almighty is not the power to see the future, it is the power to change it. And now, actually, what we get here, I think, is a weakness of the Almighty. I think Yhwach is using what he's saying as an attempt to mock Ichigo, but I think he's revealed a pretty critical weakness of the power. He says, you know, don't be alarmed, it is no different than the powers you both possess. Just as you are unable to influence no more than the one instant that exists before your eyes, all I can do is influence and change the entirety of fate that I see in mine. So, although he's kind of like, oh, you know, I can only do that as well, don't worry, Yhwach, I think, has perhaps inadvertently revealed a serious flaw to his power. Yes, he can see the future, and yes, he can change it, but only if it involves him. So, you know, a couple of weeks ago, he was talking all big about how, oh, I can see every grain of sand, and I can change every possibility. Yes, but only if they involve him. So now, why is that a weakness? Well, because I feel like two things are going to come of this. You can defeat Yhwach by somehow not appearing in his future, which is pretty impossible. Or Yhwach's future powers are only affecting one instance, and that's his life. And I think Uryu's revealed ability in this chapter is going to be key to stopping that, and we'll get to that when we get there. So Yhwach says, you know, up until now, you've overcome despair and changed your fate. The only reason you've been able to do that is because I was not there. You know, because obviously if Yhwach was there, Ichigo, he could have warped Ichigo's future. So what we get here is, we do get, I think, a weakness to the Almighty. He can only affect what's happening in his life right now. So, you know, Uryu and Haschwalth, who are doing their own thing, who are on their own grains of sand, I don't think Yhwach can affect them. I'm pretty sure that's what we're talking about here. So he then says, you know, go on Ichigo, try and change the future, because, you know, it is that I can see, I will be able to see how spectacular of a future it will be. He then says, you know, change it and I shall chop down any fate you tried to carve out for yourself. And he kind of holds his blade up and he says, you know, you can despair now, Ichigo. And Ichigo basically screams because he can't win, and then we transition. Now, that beginning bit's not bad. I like that we get the reveal of Yhwach's potential weakness. I feel like it maybe goes on for a bit long. But now we come over to the Uryu and Haschwalth fight, and I have to be completely honest, I'm actually more interested in this fight than the Ichigo and Yhwach one. And I think that's because Kubo did a pretty damn good job, in my opinion, of building up the relationship between Uryu and Haschwalth. Haschwalth has never trusted Uryu, and for good reason, because Uryu has been trying to pull the wool over his eyes the entire time. And so it's naturally, in my opinion, built to a point where they would obviously fight. They would, you know, there's been that inherent distrust between them, which in my opinion has always led to a fight. So we cut to them, and Uryu is on the ground again, you know, covered in blood, and Haschwalth finally gives us his Schrift, and it is, of course, the balance, what we have always said. And he's also holding a pretty awesome-looking shield now as well, which seems to come out of nowhere. But it's got an inverted Quincy cross on it. It actually looks really cool. He then reveals that his ability is by taking the misfortune that occurs within my sphere of influence and dispersing it to those that have fortuitous luck and lead charmed lives, I maintain balance in the world. So obviously when Kangdu had the good luck to protect himself from Haschwalth's ability, Haschwalth transformed that into misfortune and dispelled it back onto Kangdu, exactly as we all thought, like 100 chapters ago, whenever that was. Haschwalth then says that I can take all the misfortune that would happen to my own self and redirect it into this Frund shield, which is substitute shield. And then that shield essentially, because Haschwalth, rather than take the damage, it can be put into the shield instead, and then it can rebound again because it's been, that's more misfortune. So it's an interesting power. It's entirely based on reflecting and, reflective abilities. It is an interesting power. It's quite a broken power as well because he, in a way, is unbeatable. But we shall see. It then says, your chances of winning are nil, Ichigo, and Uryu's trying to stand back up. Haschwalth then says, it seems I'm no longer able to get any answers out of you. If you wish to remain mute, that's fine. This will be your end. And he lifts his blade up. But then Uryu says, wait, don't you wish to see my Schrift? And Haschwalth's like, oh, how pathetic. This is such a sad attempt to buy yourself some seconds. If your Schrift would have assured you victory, you would have surely used it by now. So this is cool because this effectively, like Ichigo previously, gives us a reason for Uryu getting his ass handed to him. It was effectively on purpose. He says, you got it backwards. I was just thinking it's about time. My Schrift, A, the antithesis. I don't think anyone saw that coming. Unlike Haschwalth's one, nobody saw antithesis coming. Everyone was expecting the archer, the arrow, anything, something like that. But no. Uryu's ability allows him to take anything that's going on between two individuals or one instance and reflect it. So Uryu's taken loads of damage, and then all of a sudden Haschwalth explodes in blood, and he's just like, what the fuck? And Uryu is perfectly fine. And he says, antithesis. My ability is among two designated targets. I can completely reverse anything that has already happened. Take out instances. For example, I was able to reverse the damage between you and I. Again, massively OP. Now, the weird thing about this is, we've been somewhat led to believe that the Schrift is not a power that Yhwach bestowed upon them, but an awakening of their own individual personalities / power. Uryu has never exhibited this kind of reflection ability. You could argue that, firing an arrow is it looks like it's being reflected. I don't really know. Honestly, the antithesis does sort of seem to have come out of nowhere. Now, I think this has been hinted at in a way, because Yhwach said that Uryu survived the Auschwallen because of this ability. I want to assume that Uryu's antithesis acted when the Auschwallen tried to take his soul, and he reflected it. Now, does that mean that Yhwach lost his power? I don't know. I'm not going to lie. We need some explanation. But I'm assuming that Uryu, used the antithesis as a child to save himself from that. And this is where I think Yhwach's weakness is going to come in. If Yhwach's foresight ability only allows him to see one instance, then what happens if Uryu's antithesis messes with that instance? So Uryu and Yhwach are facing off against each other, and Ichigo's there, and Yhwach's like, I can see your future, you're about to try and attack me, I'm going to make it so you get defeated. Uryu activates the antithesis, and boom, it reflects it so that Yhwach can no longer see the future. Or maybe they'd be able to see his future. I don't know. Either way, I think that's going to be key to defeating him, and I think that's probably what they're going to do. Haschwalth then says that's a marvellous power. It might even be possible to turn that power against His Majesty. So I think that's him basically saying you can do that to reflect the futures, the foresight. He then says, with such an ability in your possession to reverse anything that's happened, you might very well be the only person capable of opposing His Majesty's power. Uryu then thinks that this has something to do with Haschwalth saying, this is to do with the true nature of the Almighty, which again clearly I think is going to be the case, that he will be able to reverse the changes made or something like that. Or yeah, even that. Yhwach will make a change in the future, Uryu will reverse it. Either way, when the inevitable battle happens, we are going to get some balls to the wall crazy shit. Time-bending, weird stuff. Uryu, upon hearing this, tries to run to Ichigo, I can help him, I can defeat Yhwach. But of course, Haschwalth's like, you actually think I'd let you go? And that's actually quite a badass. At which point Uryu kind of explodes with blood and crashes to the floor. Haschwalth using his balance to deflect the misfortune that he just received back onto Uryu. So there is a serious kind of rebounding going on here. Haschwalth says, your antithesis is indeed splendid, but it's a poor matchup for my balance. I told you I can disperse any misfortune. Any and all misfortune that befalls me is redirected into my Frun shield. Which basically means Uryu had good luck inflicting wounds upon Haschwalth, which then came back to Uryu as misfortune. So that's the first part. The second part is the damage that Haschwalth himself actually received was absorbed by his Frun shield, and then again is rebounded again on Uryu. So Uryu is cut up loads more by the attack, and he looks like he's in serious pain now. Haschwalth then says, how many times must I repeat myself? You have no chance of winning. Uryu Ichigo. And we see Uryu trying to move. We get a couple of cool panels, actually, of Uryu attempting to drag himself along the floor to Ichigo. Haschwalth then walks up behind him. He's like, you don't know when to quit. I've come to the conclusion that you're no match for myself or His Majesty. Haschwalth then steps up beside Uryu's head, holds his blade over Uryu's head, and he says, I said to you that I couldn't see your true colours, but I take that back. Those foolish humans who cling so desperately to their faith and what they believe in, you're cut from the exact same cloth. So it's interesting, again, that Haschwalth sees humans with some kind of contempt, and then, we see the motion of him striking downwards, but I'm going to say that it's been blocked by Ryuken. Seems obvious to me, but we then go back to Ichigo, and he basically gets chucked across the fucking room by Yhwach, who then grabs him by the back of the head and lifts him up, and he's like, no more fight left than you, Ichigo, I expected so much more, and he's been all creepy. And now we get an interesting moment for Ichigo's character. Ichigo has never properly given up. There have been, I would say, 2 instances in the series where Ichigo's given up, and they've both been against major villains. The first one is against Aizen. Just after Aizen broke out of his cocoon and left the Soul Society, Ichigo basically turned around to Isshin and said, we can't win, it's over. We can't beat this guy, he's a monster. And then obviously Isshin kicked his ass and he was like, oh, we can do that, it's fine, we can fight on. The second time was when Ginjo stole his power, and Ichigo was crying on the floor. Now, even then, I want to say that Ichigo hadn't given up, because the last thing Ichigo does before getting stabbed by Urahara's blade is get back up and he's like, Ginjo! And then he gets stabbed through the chest. So even then, I'm not sure he completely gave up. The Aizen one, I think Ichigo was like, we can't win. And that's basically it. All Kiora, Ichigo never gave up. Even to the point where he died, he never gave up. But now he's basically saying, my sword has no effect. Inoue's shield can't beat him. Nothing we do can beat this guy. And we get this really kind of solemn picture of Ichigo with just a black background saying it's over. And that's so crazy to think that Ichigo was in such a good place prior to this, and now he's just completely had the crap beaten out of him. His shoulder pads have been completely eradicated. He's basically just wearing a basic Shihaku shirt now because he's been completely just decimated. Yhwach seems to realise this, and he drops Ichigo to the floor, and he's like, this is what I got all worked up for. What a massive waste. Now this is interesting. He says, I suppose you did provide me some entertainment. Now for your final duty. And I'm not going to lie, I turned the page expecting him to say something like, I'm going to take over your body now. But no, we get actually a really cool panel of Yhwach reaching forwards. It's like super sinister, and he's like, it's time for the power that I so generously granted you to return to its rightful owner. And the last thing we see is Yhwach grabbing Ichigo's face and the Blute rushing to Yhwach. That's the end of the chapter. You know what? I can't be the only one who's getting huge Ginjo vibes here. This is basically how 459 ended. I think it's 459. It could be 458. Where Ginjo stabs Ichigo in the chest and he says, your fall brings mine. And literally the last panel you get is it rushing out. And Ichigo's eye. Literally the exact same thing is going on here, but I'm kind of wondering where this leaves us. There's a couple of things I want answers for. I'm assuming that the power that Yhwach is talking about is Ichigo's Quincy power, the Zangetsu inside of him. One, why does he want it back? A lot of people have theorized that maybe it will make him whole and that he won't have to sleep anymore and this sort of thing. Possibly. And And 2, what will happen to Ichigo without his Quincy powers? Will the balance inside his body go all haywire? Will he go nuts? Will he just die? Will there be soul suicide that just kills him? Or, really what is going to happen here if Yhwach saps Ichigo of his Quincy powers? Because then old man Zangetsu is going to disappear, one could think. I tell you what might happen if Kubo decides to go the kind of super cheesy route, is Ichigo's powers will be sapped into Yhwach, but from inside Yhwach, old man Zangetsu will wreak havoc. I could possibly see something like that happening if, it turns out that, old man Zangetsu was originally just supposed to be an apparition of Yhwach, but he's developed such a bond with Ichigo that he now fights for Ichigo, or something like that. And then Yhwach's basically being fucked up from inside. Or Ichigo's powers won't get fully stolen. I do think that next week is Isshin and Ryuken's anticipated arrival. I think it's got to be. There's a colour page next week, apparently, for the first time in ages. Will it be those two? Maybe. I'd actually rather it's a picture of, Haschwalth or something, but I don't think that's going to happen. Either way, I'm super excited for next week. This was actually a really good chapter for the first time in quite a while. So I'm going to give this one a 4.5 out of 5. I thought it was super interesting. Really great to finally get the Schrifts of Uryu and Haschwalth. That was cool. Cool to finally get a potential weakness for the Almighty, and just the ending of this chapter was pretty crazy as well. And it is making me wonder where it's going. A lot of people think the series is definitely very close to its end. Renji got the the volume cover for 73, which is a super weird choice, and it's making people wonder, is Kubo just giving the Nakama covers because it's almost over? Very possible. I think there's still a little way to go yet, though. At least a year, I would say, because Yhwach's clearly not anywhere near being defeated. And then there's a lot of stuff as well I think needs to be addressed after that. Aizen already going to have a role to play. The Soul King, I think, still needs to have a role. I still think we need a flashback. And yeah, there's still a lot to go. So guys, let me know in the comments below what you thought of this week's chapter. Did you like it? What do you think is going to happen next? Is this time for the fathers to come in and protect their sons? I think it probably is. What's going to happen to Ichigo if the Quincy powers are taken from him? And why is Yhwach trying to take that power back? Let me know in the comments below, guys. I'd super appreciate it. If you subscribed as well, that would be awesome. But until next time, catch you later.